Horizon just Homes and this is History Summarized Ukraine by the channel Oli Sarcastic production. Yeah, it's been a while since I did a history summarized video by OSP, but since this is about Ukraine, I thought it's gonna be an interesting video because I don't know much about Ukraine's history, and with the recent events, it'll be really interesting to see detailed summary of Ukraine. So let's watch it.
Regular viewers of OSP may know that we plan our videos out several months in advance, and in this case I've had it in my schedule for a year and a half to make a video about Ukraine. But it's a big topic, long history there, so I held off, ultimately procrastinating my way into an actual f***ing war. Embarrassingly, that is the second time I've done this. I had this video slated for summer, but given the gravity of the situation, this frankly can't wait any longer. Because not only have the people of Ukraine shown themselves to be iron-willed legends in defense of their country, but some delusional amateur historians have claimed that the entire concept of the Ukrainian identity is imaginary, and their nation-state is nothing more than some Russians who got lost and picked up an accent. As a result, I would say that some historical context is in order. So, to learn the course of Ukrainian civilization and understand what their patriots are fighting for, let's do some history. One technicality before we dig in, the name is just Ukraine, no the. Ukraina means borderland according to one version of the etymology, as it referred to the territory around Kiev.
So I guess lots of people don't realize this, but when you put the in front of the country's name like that, right, it just, I guess, it in simple terms, it applies that this is part of something else rather than being its own sovereign, independent country or something like that, right? So before the independence, this probably was called the, Ukraine. But after the independence, obviously it's just Ukraine. But lots of people don't realize it. It was somebody even comments that the Ukraine. Then somebody tells them like, okay, it's not the Ukraine, it's just Ukraine. People don't realize that what's the point? What's the big deal of putting the in front of it? But it kind of politically it matters.
And the many empires that surrounded it over the centuries, so traditional names essentially called it the borderlands. But since the dissolution of the USSR, don't worry, we'll get there, it's a tad déclassé to use the. Ukraine calls itself Ukraine, and thus so should we. One of the reasons it's been neighbors with so many different people is because the East European plain just goes. Everything north of the Black Sea and east of the Carpathian Mountains is flat, open, and full of rivers, so it's an easy walk, ride, or sail. In the 600s, the land of the eastern branch of Slavs reached up along the Dnieper, a river that would soon be dominated by our boys the Vikings. Sailing south from their Baltic home to schmooze with the fat cats in Constantinople, Vikings followed the rivers through Slavic land, building up some handy way stations for the long trips. And in a remarkable contrast from literally the entire rest of European history, the Slavs apparently invited the Vikings to stay. At least, according to the primary chronicle from 3 centuries later, the Slavs invited 3 Viking brothers to come rule over the northern Dnieper Valley and protect them from the Turkic Khazars to their east. In the decades following, Vikings...
It's something, right, that local people actually ask some other power or some other people to come here and rule them and, I guess, save them from other people. I'm not sure if, how accurate this history is. I mean, obviously, nobody can be sure, right? I mean, the sources is not going to be that strong. But maybe it could be, right? Because we are talking about the Vikings, right? And at the time, everybody knew how deadly the Vikings are and how warrior-like they are. So maybe they just realized, you know what? If Vikings are leading us, we might have a chance or something.
Enthusiasm for new local cultures led them to Slavicize, and so the two cultures merged, giving the predominantly Slavic lands of what was known as the Rus a characteristically Scandinavian talent for seafaring. And after Prince Rurik established what would become a 7th century dynasty in 862 at the northern town of Novgorod, his successor Oleg pushed south along the Dnieper to take Kiev as his new capital in 882, a city that would remain the beating heart of Rus civilization for centuries. Now, the Slavic plus Viking culture mosaic of what historians now call the Kievan Rus had a third piece to add, and that was Byzantine Christianity. Princess Olga of Kiev converted while visiting Constantinople in the 950s and is honored as a saint for her efforts in the early Christianization of the Rus. This pairs interestingly with her tenure as Princess Regent after her husband's murder, because she exacted a rather thorough revenge on the party responsible, going so far as to sack a city with improvised incendiary pigeons. Allegedly. Still, points for ingenuity. Later that century, Grand Prince...
Oh, wait a minute. I think I was... did Salmonella cover that part or something? I remember, burning a town with pigeon or something like that.
Vladimir wanted a political marriage to the Byzantine princess, so he obliged the emperor's request to please stop being a heathen and convert to Christianity. But Volodymyr's baptism in 988 had much wider effects, converting the entire Kievan Rus, adopting the Cyrillic alphabet, and building new schools and churches. The Byzantines, for their part, got a band of 6,000 elite Varangian mercenaries, plus a much friendlier neighbor and trading partner to the north. Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise kept pace with a new legal code and a booming literary culture, making the 1000s a golden age for the Kievan Rus and a transformational period in Slavic history. If we look at Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus today, we're seeing the legacy of the Kievan Rus, not just in the root of their name, nor just in their geography, but as a civilization made from the combination of Slavic, Scandinavian, and Byzantine Orthodox cultures. Yet, as we've seen time and time again, states and empires are fragile things in the medieval period, so after trade along the Dnieper slowed and wars on the eastern frontier drained the treasury, subsequent infighting among the princes sapped the Kievan Rus of the power and wealth it enjoyed before. The state began decentralizing after Yaroslav's death in 1054, but it went splitsies for real after a grand prince died in 1132 and local lords got grabby. Kiev still held on to its immediate vicinity, but Novgorod and Vladimir became their own centers of power in the north, with many smaller principalities sprinkled in between, such as Galicia and Volhynia in the far southwest, who combined in 1199 and got promoted by the Pope to the Kingdom of Ruthenia in 1253, that name being the Latin for Rus and an early name for Ukraine before just Ukraine. The kingdom founded a new capital at Lviv in 1272, from where they traded with Poland, Hungary, the post-Crusade Byzantines, and the Mongols. Yeah, about that. So, while all that was happening, the lands of the former Rus got turbo-stomped by the Mongol armies, with Moscow sacked in 1238 and Kiev biting it in 1240. What wasn't directly absorbed into the Golden Horde was made a vassal, and this left an opening for the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania to go snapping up all the defenseless principalities over the next century. By 1400, Poland pushed through Lviv down to Bilgorod at the coast, and the recently Christianized Lithuania punched into the Dnieper Valley for Kiev, with the Golden Horde still holding the coast from Crimea eastward. And so Ukraine's trajectory breaks away from Russia and later Belarus and toward a long history at the borderlands of foreign empires. The next century of Polish-Lithuanian dominion saw a steady process of Polandization.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to see how Mongols, right, basically I mean, all the events are happening suddenly. The Mongols come with horses and stampeding just right through the countries like it's nothing. Mongols were fucking scary, man.
In what they called Ruthenia. This meant promoting Catholicism in place of Orthodoxy and encouraging Ruthenian nobles to act more like the Polish-Lithuanian nobility. However, this influence couldn't reach everywhere, so an Orthodox ethnic Ukrainian group called the Cossacks made the wild fields of the far southeast a bastion of Ukrainian culture. When and how exactly they did this is tricky to pinpoint, but by the 1600s they'd grown from seasonal hunting communities into a democratically self-governing cultural militia sort of thing, because in addition to Poland, they were also sandwiched between the Russian Empire and the Ottomans. Poland appreciated when the Cossacks fought the Ottomans, but didn't repay that.
Damn,
Russian Empire and the Ottomans. Poland.
Look at that, Cossacks between Ottomans and Russia. Imagine that being your neighbor at that time, right? Holy shit.
Poland appreciated when the Cossacks fought the Ottomans, but didn't repay that with autonomy or more rights. So after decades of previous attempts, the leading hetman Bohdan Khmelnytsky rose against the Polish crown and succeeded in creating the Cossack Hetmanate, the first independent Ukrainian state in over 300 years. The sovereign spirit of this moment is captured in the 1891 painting Reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks, wherein after the Ottoman Sultan sent them a letter politely asking their surrender, the Cossacks had the absolute time of their lives drafting a response telling the Sultan why and
Oh, Sultan, Turkish devil and damn devils, Keith and Keen's secretary to Lucifer himself. Imagine the messenger going to the Sultan and basically reading that. As soon as he says the first sentence, Sultan's like, that's it, I already enough, I don't need to read more.
Specifically how he could f*** off. In detail. Stuff of legends. In this case, quite literally, because it was probably just a story, but nonetheless hilarious. The Hetmanate made diplomatic overtures to their assorted imperial neighbors, but they were all pretty flaky, and so the Cossacks seesawed between various alignments until 1667, when Russia and Poland split the difference by splitting Ukraine, carving it up along the Dnieper, with Poland taking the right bank and Russia taking the left. Both co-opted religion for the benefit of the rulers, as the Orthodox Church and the Russian Empire governed from and in the interest of Moscow, while the fully Catholic Rutheniate Union albeit church was the only liturgically Orthodox option allowed in Poland. Ukrainian culture did have its own Baroque era at the turn of the 1700s, with such monuments as the Kievan Golden Age St. Sophia Cathedral getting restored and gorgeously embellished in Baroque style, but it was swiftly followed by a century of stronger and stronger outside interference, culminating in the Russian Empire and friends destroying Poland and conquering all of Ukraine, along with Crimea, for itself. The Cossack Hetmanate was no easy ride, as it's tough to be independent amid a game of hungry empires, but this moment of re-emerging statehood represented a new mode of Ukrainian culture, defined in part by its borderland encirclement and independent aspirations in spite of big angry neighbors. Easy, perhaps, to see why that might be a powerful motivator. So coming into the 1800s, we find ourselves neck-deep in the Russia plotline, where we will stay for a while. Hot off their success.
Yeah, so basically only trend I see that anybody that says that Ukraine didn't exist before, I mean, they are choosing like how far behind history you're trying to look, right? I mean, not going all the way back. You're just stopping at certain point, like, okay, there was no Ukraine before this. I mean, come on, man, you can't just pick and choose like that, right? You can do the same shit with India, right? If you can just go just far behind it, like, okay, India didn't exist before, British came to there. And I'm lots of people even comments like India wasn't a thing, it was just separate kingdoms and separate kings and this and that. Like, there were separate kings and, everywhere, sultans and things like that, right? Everybody recognized that beyond Indus River is India, right? Even Alexander the Great recognized that this beyond Indus River, valley or whatever. So yeah, it's just how far back you're looking. That's where people have problem with, I guess.
Success in obliterating Poland, step 2 was Russifying their newly acquired territories, moving Russians into the east and south to replace Crimean Tatars with ethnic Russians, building up urban centers to Russian spec, and later banning the Ukrainian language to replace it with Russian. The one exception being an Austrian-held Galicia, where Ukrainian and Polish thinkers were able to express their national identity through literature. And that cultural groundwork came in mighty handy when the Russian Empire imploded in 1917. Longer story, World War I is a wild ride. With the Tsars, the Austrians, and the Ottomans out of the picture entirely, and rather suddenly at that, Ukraine and several neighbors declared independence. The idea of Ukrainian nationhood was in the air for the past century, but as each of the newly formed Eastern European states soon found out, actually creating a country is a complicated business. Unfortunately, the choice was taken out of their hands as the Russian Revolution.
Yeah, Otto von Bismarck is laughing at that probably.
Who replaced the Tsars soon rolled into Ukraine and looped it into the new United Soviet Socialist Republic. Administratively, this was different from the old empire, as Ukraine was its own Soviet Socialist Republic within the wider Soviet Union, alongside Belarus, Russia, and the 12 other constituent republics. And at first, Soviet policy celebrated this variety, creating a specifically Ukrainian Orthodox Church and promoting the language.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, Soviet was a Soviet Union, so yeah.
Sure. However, that was before Stalin. Again, longer story, communism is a wild ride, but as far as Ukraine was concerned, Joseph Stalin was the mustachioed embodiment of hell itself.
Seriously.
As part of his policy to punish Ukraine for crimes ranging from not being communist enough to existing at all, Stalin ordered nearly all Ukrainian wheat to be exported for industrialization, essentially orchestrating an artificial famine that killed over 4 million Ukrainians in the early 1930s. This coincided with a systematic
What kind of an a-hole you have to be to literally take out everybody's food like that for some bullshit without even realizing that you're gonna starve people to death of their region, right? I mean, that's just effed up, right? There's many stories about Stalin like that, right? Doing heinous shit like that.
Of Ukrainian intellectuals and their Orthodox clergy. Now, Ukraine had handled Polonization and Russification under the old empires, but this was full-on genocide. This wasn't some tragic but necessary consequence of Soviet ideology. This was the point. Keep them poor, break their spirit, take their resources, and hope they forget they exist. And just when it couldn't get worse, World War II. Russia's invasion of Poland in 1939 added Galicia to the Ukrainian SSR, but 2 years later, Germany launched a surprise-ish attack and took all of Ukraine. The Soviets, for their part, made a point to burn everything on the way out, killing political prisoners, destroying infrastructure, and wrecking food supplies. By the time the USSR was reassembled and the war was won, Ukraine suffered another 8 million deaths. And from being down a quarter of the population inside of a decade, it was hard for things to get worse. With the exception of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986, Ukraine's post-war history was a steady, albeit slow, climb upward, culminating in the dissolution of the USSR in 1991 and a 92% vote in favor of Ukrainian independence. Given everything we have learned about Ukraine over the 1,000+ years of their history, this should not be surprising. But this, of course, does not mean that the story is over. Political corruption is a habit that dies hard, so Ukrainians took to the streets in 2004 and again in the Maidan uprising of 2014 to oust Viktor Yanukovych, both times from office, the result of which was the Russian Federation annexing the Crimean Peninsula and violently exacerbating an insurgency in the eastern Donbas region. In 2018, the Russian Orthodox Church severed ties with the Orthodox Church in Constantinople for recognizing Ukraine's religious independence from Moscow. And, of course, in 2022, Russia monstrously and disgracefully invaded the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Longer story, the 2020s are a wild ride.
Fuck.
But as we've clearly seen, Ukrainian history isn't just
The images of the current events is really fucking sad. Because this just happened in this past few weeks. Like a month or so ago, this wasn't a thing. So all the photos you see, all the buildings are fucking destroyed. All the buildings are destroyed everywhere you see. A month or so ago, that wasn't the case. Those buildings were fine. Everybody just peacefully walking there like it's a normal city, because it was a normal city, and now it's so surreal, man.
backstory to a modern conflict, it's a tale of a civilization crafting an identity from the confluence of multiple different cultures, then defending that identity against invasive forces and recontextualizing that identity as that precise borderland struggle. In a part of Europe otherwise known for giant empires, that's something, and something very much worth fighting for at that. Русский военный хораби, иди нахуй. Slava Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for watching. Oh,
Seriously, that what he said last one, that video, I saw that video, and that was some badass thing they did, right? Knowing that warship is probably going to destroy the, bomb the island, right? They still said that. That's some badass thing right there.
OSP will be donating the advertising revenue from this video.
Yeah. So, yeah, Ukraine's history. I mean, obviously, I remember, one of the Ukrainian minister basically tweeting something to Russian minister or something, that when they said that Ukraine has no history or something, and they showed what in 1200 or 1100, showed what was happening in Kyiv and what was happening in Moscow. Moscow was just filled with, just trees and nothing else, while Kyiv has all these buildings or something. Yeah. Yeah. Alright, well, that was History Summarized Ukraine by the channel Sarcastic production. Yeah, this was a really good video because it's a summary. It's a short 12-minute video, and he covered history really great in summary basically. So if somebody just doesn't want to watch a massive documentary or something about this, and just 10 minutes to see what's the real history of Ukraine, this is an awesome video. Alright people, if you like my reaction, do like, subscribe, comment down if you want to react to a specific video, and yeah, I'll see you next time.